So my name is Beau Lotto, and I'm a professor of neuroscience, and I focus in particular on perception. I study how the brain makes meaning of itself in the world. And I'm a professor at University London, and I'm also a visiting scholar at NYU. I'm also founder and CEO of two startups. The first one is an augmented reality company, which owns seven major patents in augmented reality space. And the second organization is called the Lab of Misfits, where we work with leading brands and helping them to both understand what's the business they're in, the purpose of their business, and how to become authentic in that business. The biggest challenge facing brands and leaders is the same challenge we all face, which is the challenge of uncertainty. So the world is changing. It's always been changing, but it's changing faster. The changes are more fluid. And we also have global changes and shared changes. For instance, the top in-demand jobs in 2010 didn't even exist in 2004. So we are educating young people and old people for a world that doesn't yet exist. Technology is making our changes exponential. And because we're more connected, things that happen on the other side of the world now affect us immediately. How do we deal with uncertainty? Because uncertainty is the fundamental problem that our brain evolved to solve. In fact, every living system evolved to solve this one challenge. Almost everything we do is an attempt to decrease uncertainty. It's fundamental to our lives. It's what enabled us to survive during evolution. Because if you couldn't predict during evolution, you died. So when you're in a place of uncertainty, you feel stressed, you go to panic, you in fact become less creative, you start seeing patterns where no pattern exists. The irony is that the only way you as an individual or an organization or as a leader can thrive in uncertainty is to go to the very place we evolved to avoid, which is not knowing. So how do we go there? And the answer is perception. It's perceptual intelligence. Because what happens is we go into what I call the certainty trap. We become certain about everything. And the irony is that the only place you ever learned anything new was to go to the place of not knowing. You never learn from knowing, you learn from not knowing. So how do we go to not knowing? It's perception. How do organizations become adaptable and creative? So what's fascinating is the most successful systems in nature are adaptable. They don't just adapt, they're adaptable. So organizations actually have to embrace adaptability. Now, adaptability is effectively innovation, and innovation has two sides. It has efficiency and it has creativity. Almost all organizations focus only on one side of that equation, efficiency, which is a brilliant idea if it weren't for the fact that the world changes. And as the world changes, you become increasingly inefficient. And what they don't realize is they have to embrace both sides of that equation. They also have to be creative. Now, to become creative means you have to be able to see differently, which is, again, why perception and perceptual intelligence, understanding why you see what you do, holds the key to seeing differently. Because perception underpins everything it is to be you as a leader, as an organization, as an individual. And only until you understand why you see what you do can you ever see differently. It gives you agency in your creativity and your innovation. So how does my expertise in neuroscience help organizations and individuals, and in particular leaders, become more adaptable? And the way we do that is by focusing on the principles of perceptions, not the rules. So often, people want rules. It's one of the strategies we use when facing uncertainty. They say, give me a recipe, give me the 5 rules to seeing differently. And the answer is, I can't. Because those rules, while efficient, are fragile. They don't apply across context. Instead, what we focus on is the principles of perception, because principles transcend context. And those principles are the principles of leadership. Lead by example, admit mistakes, and see qualities in others. And when leaders create this culture, a number of very important things happen. They start leading from the perspective of not knowing. They create an environment that has purpose, but also authenticity in that purpose. Because without authenticity, your purpose is just a slogan. And when you discover that purpose and are authentic in that purpose, now people actually want to not just work for you, but work for the organization, because everyone wants to have a sense of value in their life. In doing so, you actually increase the possibility of retention and recruitment, which is a huge problem facing the industry, all industries right now. You also get diversity and inclusion in some sense for free, because the most successful systems are not just diverse, they're also integrated, which so many businesses forget to focus on. Not just diversity, but integrating across that diversity. Now you get a resilient organization where people want to work. And what's more, you increase the loyalty of your audience and increase the share of your audience in a very competitive landscape. So the way that brands make a more impactful impact on their audience is to understand who their audience are. And who are their audience? It's the perception of their audience. So your brain works at the level of meaning. To understand another person is not just to understand what they did, where they did it, and when they did it. The data is to understand why they did it, the meaning of why they did it. And in understanding why they do what they do, now you can engage with them as them. And what's true for your audience is actually true for interpersonal relationships. To understand another person, to understand why they do what they do, not simply what they did. And that has everything to do with perceptual neuroscience. And this is what I try to help organizations accomplish. And what's more, my lab of misfits also works with brands like Cirque du Soleil, Hot Point, Whirlpool, again, in engaging and deepening the engagement with their audiences by evidencing and creating quantifiable impacts in the personal lives of the people that they're actually in service of. And in doing so, it deepens the relationships, increases the loyalty, which is essential in times of uncertainty. It makes you a more resilient organization, and it affects your bottom line. So the fact of life, which has always been true, is that life changes. And again, in nature, the most successful systems are the ones that are adaptable. If life changes, you have to change with it. But more importantly is you have to want to change. Because if you don't want to, you're not going to engage in that changing world. And in fact, you're going to create a world that is highly predictable. So what we really need to do, especially with the young who are facing increasing change, is to demonstrate that change is actually a beautiful thing, that conflict is a beautiful thing. Conflict and change are the only places you can ever go if you're going to do anything interesting. You've never done anything interesting in your life from the position of knowing. You've only ever done something interesting in your life from the position of not knowing. By definition, you don't learn if you stand still. You only ever learn when you move. And one of the greatest places to move is in conflict. The problem is not conflict, it's how we engage in conflict. We almost always engage in conflict with the desire to stand still and to win, to prove that the other person is wrong and to shift them towards us. So we set up conflict to win and not learn. What would happen if instead we entered conflict with the desire to understand rather than be validated? We enter conflict with uncertainty rather than certainty, with a question rather than an answer. And in doing so, you actually expand your perception, because the aim is not to shift your view, it's to expand your view. And when you expand your view, you now have understanding. And when you have understanding, your brain gets an intrinsic reward. because understanding was good during evolution. It enabled you to actually better engage with an uncertain future. And so by giving young people and older people the desire to want to change, that's where we have to begin. Not giving rules and recipes about change, but making you want to, because that's where we're going to get real impact. So what's next for us is increasingly to create experiences for brands and individuals and organizations that really simply don't just tell people what to do, but we engage people in the process of discovery itself. We get them to embody these principles. Because as soon as you tell something to someone, you've kind of taken it from them. What your brain really wants to do is discover it for themselves, which is why in my presentations, in my master classes, and in our immersive experiences, we try to get people to not just know something, but understand something, to embody it. Because now it will become part of their life. Because what we need people to do is engage in the world with perceptual intelligence. And it's something that you have to practice every single day. Just like when you go to the gym. You don't go to the gym once and say, brilliant, that's me sorted. My body's now sorted. No, but we treat our brain as if it's somehow different. Practicing perceptual intelligence is essential. And so we're trying to give people mechanisms and processes by which to practice. But we have this all the time. Every conversation that you're in, whether it be with your colleagues, whether it's with your boss or your loved ones and your friends, you have the ability to practice your perceptual intelligence many times every single day.